On the morning of 9/11, I had been living in Richmond for about a month. I moved in August of that year and was preparing to start my first semester as a film professor. I was teaching that day in the Adams Auditorium and had two classes of the Introduction to Film Studies, which is a course that introduces students to the ways of analyzing and working with film. And the attacks on the Twin Towers happened probably about 15 minutes before my class started. So we were all gathered around the desk in the MRC, which is where the Adams Auditorium is located, watching the footage that was coming up on the news channels on the TV there. And students, as they were coming into that area to go into the classroom, would stop and watch for a little bit. And then eventually I gathered them all in and brought them into the classroom. I wasn't really sure if I was supposed to be teaching or not, but it seemed like no one had told me not to teach, so I figured I would just work my way through the lesson plan. I did announce at the beginning of class that if there are any students who needed to leave because they needed to try to contact someone or get in touch with their families, they were welcome to do that. And I think about 3 or 4 students actually did leave. And then I went ahead and taught the class. And it was very uncomfortable the entire time that I was analyzing these different films and looking at different shots and asking the students to respond to things. I had this other dialogue going on in the back of my mind where I was wondering what was happening out in the world and whether I should just be letting them all go, or should I somehow even be talking to the students about what was happening and getting their impressions. But I was a first-time professor, and this was my first semester teaching at U of R, and I didn't want to do anything that was going to make me look, I don't know, unprofessional or inappropriate. So I just kept right on teaching. And I'm not sure I would handle it the same way now, this many years later. I probably would feel a little bit more confident about maybe changing my approach. Then when the second section met, which was just shortly after that first class, I just did the same thing all over again, letting students who wanted to go or felt like they needed to try to contact people to leave. The rest of the day was strange. Faculty were talking a little bit about what was going on. There were some emails updating us from various administrative offices, trying to keep everybody in the loop on what was happening and what was known at that point. Since some of the attacks took place at the Pentagon, and which is, of course, in Northern Virginia, there is some concern that there might be other attacks at other kinds of military installations in the state. So I do remember there was some anxiety being expressed among faculty about that potential. Similarly, with the Federal Reserve here in Richmond, there was some concern that that might be a target as well. Once the day ended, I went home, and I'd only been living in my house at that point for about a month, and I didn't really know my neighbors yet. So I walked to this bar in my neighborhood called, of all things, Shenanigans, and just sat at the bar and talked to some of the other folks in the neighborhood and watched the news on the TV that was set up in the bar. And I ended up staying there really late, just chatting with people and watching CNN and seeing what was happening. When I finally went to bed, I remember thinking, well, at least I don't have to teach tomorrow. I would have one more day in which I didn't have to think about how I was going to approach the students or how I was going to handle the subject matter. And then slowly things went back to what would then become normal. I think the next class, which was on the Thursday, again, I sort of offered the students the opportunity to take off if they didn't need to be there, but no one did that time. And we just kept right on working our way through the Introduction to Film Studies for the rest of the semester.